Hey all, I'm Timur. I work in the video games industry, and lately, like many of you, my thoughts have been consumed by the horrible things happening to Palestinian people, and more importantly, the efforts to raise awareness around it. Recently, one of the most powerful things I've seen is the community's ability to draw attention to important causes, and we've seen the ways it can have real impact in supporting those causes. So, with that in mind, I wanted to take the time to put the call out to people and think about the power they have in this respect, and consider doing the same for Palestinians that need your help. I'm going to be honest, the response in the industry is a stark contrast to the way big streamers rallied for other causes over the last few years. I don't wish to draw a comparison between the way streamers and influencers reacted for one cause or another to how they have or haven't to the one for Palestine. I don't think it's fair to do that. All of these causes are extremely important and worthy and valuable and deserving of whatever support that they can get. And people have different awareness levels around each of them. But I think it's important to speak to some of the people that have the reach to make an impact and ask them to think about what they can do. I can't help but reflect on why the awareness seems so low right now. People have the ability to educate themselves to the extent where you can see the need to support Palestinians that are suffering. And this was the case for other major social issues that garnered a groundswell of support and activism online. People made it their business to learn and build an understanding so that they could utilize their platforms to effectively support these causes. But this doesn't seem to be happening for Palestinians. Before I continue, I want to highlight that I'm a Muslim, and many of the people in Palestine that are suffering are Muslim. And the actions taken against them occurred during Ramadan, one of the holiest months for Muslims. And a mosque that is one of the most important to Islam was also hit by the violence. So, yeah, I have a bias. Having said that, my religious beliefs or cultural backgrounds are not core to why I think it's important to look at what is happening. Voice opposition to the war crimes being committed against the Palestinians, and do whatever you can to raise awareness. It's simply humans being treated ruthlessly. And that's something that anyone can feel compelled to speak out against. The suffering of Palestinian people is something that, for most, is taking place in a far off land and has been for decades. The Middle East may as well be a different planet, but more importantly, it's always been presented in Western media as a place perpetually in conflict. Whether it's the news or other forms of entertainment, we've been trained to believe that war is the natural state of the Middle East and its people. And because of that, the things that people see and hear in passing don't look like upheaval, not in the way that the sense of normality was broken during the events of last year when police attacked Black Lives Matter protesters and everything that's happened since. Everything obviously that happened in America and around the world then is just the way things have always been for the community. It was just thrust into the spotlight in a way the wider world couldn't ignore. But I would say that same thing is happening in Palestine too, but people aren't seeing it or reacting to it. And I think there's a reason for that. Our games, movies, TV shows, comic books show the region as a staging ground for fighting and nothing more. So the people tend to think, how is what is happening now any different from what has always been happening there? But it's important to unpack that, because what is happening there, if you really stop to think about it, is people living perpetually under siege, being displaced, subjugated, kidnapped, killed, having their families torn apart, having their numbers dwindle and their homes taken from them or leveled entirely. This happens, that dismissal happens on a subconscious level in a lot of cases. I think that within the games industry especially, people can empathize and will know it's important to lend their aid. But we've been trained to gloss over things that are happening there. The media does a lot of work to dehumanize people in the Middle East and make it feel like this web of complicated politics that is impossible to untangle. It's this decades long conflict between two forces that has a long history of disputes that are impossible to unpack unless you're like one of the most informed minds and have dedicated your life to doing that. in a very real sense, we are conditioned to ignore the atrocities committed against Palestinians. You only have to look at the framing of the events in the news media to see that much is true. The impact of the lives on the lives of ordinary citizens is minimized and reframed to be this larger conflict, in the same way that we were told, oh, Black Lives Matters activists, they're Antifa. They represent a radical group called Antifa, which is in opposition to this blameless police force and government. So my message to people out there with platforms, especially in the games industry, is what you're scrolling past on Twitter, Facebook, or anywhere else and not engaging with is much simpler than the world wants you to believe it is. It's children, men, women, having their lives destroyed. It is people being forcibly removed from their homes and corralled into areas that are then pummeled with bombs. It's neighborhoods being occupied by police forces that turn a blind eye to the mistreatment of citizens, or supporting efforts to gentrify the area. You've seen police forces and government authorities exercise their disproportionate power on the helpless before. You've seen emboldened civilians treat others as lesser and act in aggression towards them. You've seen innocent people beaten, bloodied, and killed before. You stood up for them then. So it's time to ask yourself why this is really different. Ask yourself what makes the suffering of the people of Palestine different enough that you don't feel compelled to act in the same way. Is it that it's too complicated for you to weigh in on? It isn't. As much as your sensitivities allow, and while taking care of your own mental health, look at what's happening and you will see how simple it really is. Could it be that you fear reprisal from others on the internet? If so, did that stop you from supporting other causes that carry the same risk before? Is it that you're worried about brands taking action against you? Did that stop you before, and is avoiding the risk of that important enough that you're willing to stay silent while a nation of people are slowly wiped from existence? Those are questions only you have the answer to. I just ask you to really consider them and think about whether you should be doing something to raise awareness about what is happening to Palestinians and what you can do to make that happen. Thanks for your time.